sum up your medical school experience in 3 words?
Exciting. Demanding.
Tiring.
Roller coaster.
Variable.
Unexpected.
Challenging.
Stressful.
Marathon, not sprint.
Fulfilling.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video from the Aspiring Medics. In today's video, we've interviewed different Oxford medical students on their experience at Oxford University. It's shrouded by so many myths, but in today's video, we're going to be focusing on myth busting. So, if you guys enjoy it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Enjoy! I'm Yusuf, I'm a 5th year medical student, and I'm at Green Templeton College.
So I'm Alex, I'm a 5th year medical student and I'm at St Edmund Hall, or known as Teddy Hall.
My name's Oscar, I'm a final year medic. I joined 4 years ago as part of the graduate entry course. I'm at Somerville.
My name's Aisha, I'm a 6th year and I'm at GCC, but I spent my first 3 years at Jesus College.
So I am Rory, I'm one of the 6th year medics, just finished finals. Yeah, so I'm at Teddy Hall where we're filming today, and I've been there throughout the duration of medical school.
What's your favourite cell?
Probably a heart cell.
It's probably got to be a fibroblast, I think.
Tricky question. Either a neuron or I'm going to be indecisive and say cardiac myocyte as well.
A peripheral neuron.
An osteoclast.
What advice would you give your first year self?
I think the advice I'd say is know what works for you and make your own path, especially when it comes down to studying. Find out actually what works for you and trying to be as proactive as possible, but at the same time work with others because we're all in this together really.
I think it would probably be to relax and remember that medicine is much more of a marathon of learning than a sprint. Because I think when you come to Oxford, particularly because a lot of the 3-year degrees have a really intense environment, it's very easy to get caught up in that and think, okay, I'm going to work day to day really intensely and not remember that you need to give yourself time and sort of space to learn over a long period instead. So I think that would be my main piece of advice, definitely.
Work a bit harder in your first year. For the graduate entry course, the first year is very intense. It's a lot of physiology, and I came from a psychology background, so I perhaps didn't have all the language that some of the people who had more biologically related degrees. I didn't have the same language as they had, so I felt like I was doing catch-up. So I think first year, if I worked a bit harder, I'd feel a lot more competent in the second half of the course.
Just slow down, take a deep breath, and everything's going to be fine. You just need to take it slow and calm down. Just because you feel like you're behind doesn't mean that you actually are behind. And just because you feel like there's too much information and there's not enough time to learn it all doesn't mean that that's actually the case. Usually it's quite easy to get yourself in a situation where you're feeling like what you feel is consuming you. And I think if you just speak to the people around you, you'll find everybody's in the same boat. And if you just, it'll help you feel less isolated, I think.
Probably just look around you, and as much as your own style of learning is important, the people here are also very clever and kind of work out the best ways of doing things. So look around you, see what other people are doing, and just give it a go. So I think in particular, preclinical, I should have made more of essay plans.
And what advice would you give to yourself entering 4th year?
Make the most out of clinical placement and get to know the nurses and make friends with them because they know a lot and they'll be really good in teaching you practical skills, especially blood taking, for example. So if you get to know them, they'll tell you where the interesting patients are. So make friends with patients and nurses.
I think you have to be quite introspective with clinical medicine, probably more so than preclinical medicine. You have to have a real sense of awareness, and also you have to be really receptive to feedback. Because I think quite a lot of people think they're practicing in a way that's good, and then someone might perhaps point out to them that they need to readjust slightly, and you have to be quite on board with taking on that feedback. But at the same time, you have to be quite resilient because you're always sort of in smaller groups on wards, maybe even one-to-one with doctors, and that means that it can be quite intense kind of learning. It's quite different to the sort of big lectures and tutorials that we have in the first few years. So definitely sort of taking on everyone's feedback and listening to it carefully, but also having that resilience to keep pushing through every day and learning new things. So
Yes, you can slow down at first. Don't push yourself too fast, too quickly. It can be quite nerve-wracking, especially with the procedural skills. Lots of the students don't get their first phlebotomy on actual patients until later on, and Whether you want to do that earlier or later, it's up to you, but don't feel you need to rush it if you don't feel ready to practice the skills. The clinical skills lab is always open, and the people who work there are always happy to help you. Just let them know that you're coming in and check with them.
I think I really struggled initially going into fourth year, because you go from a really structured environment in preclinical where you've got lots of lectures and tutorials and labs, and you've got this massive timetable that's full of stuff, to suddenly being in charge of your own learning a lot more and having a lot more autonomy over your time. And so I think that the advice I'd like to give myself is to have a goal for every single day. And they don't need to be like big goals, but if I'm going into placement, like today I want to practice doing a cardiovascular exam and I want someone to watch me and give me feedback on that. And that's like what I want to get out of today. And I think that's really helpful for yourself, but also helpful for the clinical team around you, because if you meet like doctors or consultants, if you're in a clinic or you're on the ward and you tell them that this is what I'd like to do today, it also helps them to find them opportunities for you. And it just means that you get more out of your day rather than just going in and see what the day brings.
I actually always loved the ward rounds, and some people just find them a bit boring. It's very dependent on who you get to teach you on the ward rounds. But I think make the most of the ward rounds, and anything you can do on top of that is a bonus. But just getting comfortable with being on the wards is, like, we've just done our finals and they're very similar to the fourth year exams. But the difference between my fourth year OSCEs, and which are the kind of practical exams where we sit with actors, the difference between what I did in fourth year and sixth year basically just boils down to confidence, and that's just about being on the wards. Having said that, if it's rubbish on the wards, then just leave. Like, there's always more important things to do. And then casting your mind all the way back to your first day in first year, how are you feeling, and what was that experience like coming to university?
Yeah, I was very nervous about what Oxford would be like. And so I think I was quite scared that, like, coming to a college which at the time was sort of a higher percentage of private school students, and also coming from the Southwest and kind of knowing that quite a lot of people in Oxford come from London or sort of that area, I was a bit nervous that I wouldn't find people that I got on with or were sort of my type of person, but very quickly actually found that that's completely not the case. And I mean, my cohort here at Teddy of medics were all very supportive. I think most of us went to state school and we all helped each other through all the learning, so that was very quickly sort of gone, but that was definitely how I was feeling on the first day. And I think, yeah, I would probably say it's not how it's stereotyped to be, and I know that's a lot of people's fear as well. So.
Yeah, it's quite nerve-wracking coming into a new group of people for the first time. We had the lovely Deborah Hay teaching us haematology in our first lecture, and that really set the tone for the next 4 years, really.
I found it quite difficult because I was moving away from home, moving quite far, so my family are like 200 miles away, and I think the biggest thing that I noticed when I first moved to Oxford was everybody had a very different accent to mine, and it was picked up in pretty much any conversation that I had with anyone, and it's something that I became quite self-conscious about. But then as I spent more time here, I just realised that it's part of what makes me who I am and makes me different to other people, and that's absolutely fine.
So nervous. Like, I remember unpacking my room with my mum, and she was putting stuff everywhere, and I didn't know where she was putting stuff, and I was getting so agitated and like just nervous. I didn't know anyone here. I didn't know anyone at Oxford, but as I began to meet people and saw familiar faces from our like big group chat that we'd been messaging on for a while, like everything just kind of slowly fell into place. It took a while, but it will fall into place for any first year starting.
Can you remember how you felt after your first lecture?
I think excited. I can't remember what the first lecture actually was, but actual first weeks of it were hard. There was a lot of work, but it felt like a natural progression from A-level. So nothing felt too kind of curveball. It was just a lot of work. But as I say, you just get used to it. And everyone is in the same boat. Just talk to friends is what I'd say, because if you're feeling stressed, then the easiest thing that's ever calmed my nerves is just to talk to other people, because you actually realise that everyone is stressed and everyone is kind of feeling that they're treading water just to keep.
The last question, how did you celebrate after finishing first year exams?
So it's summer. I had all of my a cappella group come and trash me, and then we had a big night out, and then my parents came really early the next morning, which was horrendous because I was really hungover. But it felt so good just to drive out into the countryside back home, see my cat, see my dog.
Can you explain what a trashing is?
Yeah, so trashing happens after most of your exams, depending on where they are. Couldn't get trashed in these last exams we had because they were at the hospital. But what usually happens is you get sprayed with Prosecco, usually the cheapest Prosecco you can find. Confetti gets thrown on you, silly string, anything basically to make you look as just like a massive piñata.
So sometimes things can get a little bit stressful. What are some of the ways that you find to cope with that?
Powerlifting, I'd say. So training at Ifley Gym at Sports Centre really helps 4 times a week. It's really good. Obviously, it's social, and also because you can just let off some steam, really.
I think COVID would have been the most stressful point, because it hit me in my second year just before I was due to sit exams. So it was a very difficult time to have a lot of uncertainty, because we didn't know if we were sitting our exams, we didn't know what format they'd be in, and we were all just sort of sent home and had to wait for information. So I think that was possibly the most stressful part. But also in some ways, it brought a lot of meaning to the studying that we were doing, because, you know, studying medicine during a pandemic, you feel like you're actually contributing and sort of helping with what's going on in some small way. So in some ways it was also strangely motivating, but it was definitely a very difficult time to deal with a lot of uncertainty. And then coming back to university and doing the third year research project during that time as well, it was very hard to adjust to sort of new schedules and social distancing and not being able to see everyone you wanted to see. So that was quite difficult to cope with. I picked up a lot of sport over those 2 years, and I think that was definitely a good sort of way to release the stress that was going on over those years as well. But yeah, definitely staying connected to why I was studying medicine as well, and sort of keeping that meaning behind it was useful. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the sport.
So I've been rowing for the last 2.5 years, which has been absolutely fantastic. I started with Teddy Hall in my third year during the pandemic, and it's very socially distanced and it's outside, so it was one of the only things we were able to do that was sort of social and fun and keeping fit and stuff over that period. So it was a really nice thing to do then. And then I swapped to Osler House, which is the Med-Ex boat club, in my 4th year when I started clinical school. And I'm now the president of that, so I'm keeping it going. We've just had a race today as well, so it's been really good fun to row with Med-Ex and keep up with people and sort of de-stress together from the same course. So yeah.
So if I have a stressful situation, I can turn to my friends if something's gone on, but taking a break, taking a day off clinical practice if I'm feeling really stressed, so I can catch up on life admin, any learning which I want to do, or even just go out and enjoy Oxford because it's such a lovely place.
I think that's another thing I've learned through the years, is how to cope with the stress. And so when I used to get stressed out because I had too much to do or wasn't getting enough done, I used to try and work harder and longer hours, and that meant like having a really chaotic sleeping schedule and like missing out on doing nice things or cancelling plans. And as I've gotten older, I've realised that actually that used to make me less productive. And so now when things get stressful, I'll just try and take the day off, or take some time off at least, do some exercise or go for a walk, like speak to friends, go and visit some friends, visit family. And that normally like helps me reset and then realise and put things into perspective.
Yeah, so I've definitely had many stressful points. I think, so I come from mid Wales, and to begin with, it felt like it was just a million miles away and I was very homesick. But actually just going home or getting friends from home or family to come up and realising that that distance is way shorter than I thought helped a lot. And then having an extracurricular, so I sing and was in an a cappella group for most of uni, so that was basically the reason that I enjoyed these last 6 years as much as I did.
And tell me a bit about your favourite part of medical school. This can be preclinical or clinical.
I think it's definitely from fourth year beyond, especially clinical placement, because I feel like you get this massive payoff. You've learned all the science, but all of a sudden now you can apply it to patients, history taking, and it's such a good feeling, and like being a detective, sort of figuring out what's going on. And you sort of feel part of a team in hospital, and that's probably the closest I felt to sort of being a doctor, because you can actually make a difference in terms of patient care.
I think probably the first time I was doing a cannula in a patient, I was up at the Horton Hospital in Banbury, and I was feeling quite anxious. And I was very much hoping that it was me and another grad medic. And I was very much hoping that I wasn't going to be watched, but the nurse came along and was staring at me. I was absolutely terrified, shaking, which is not good when you're wielding a cannula, but I took a deep breath, relaxed myself, found the vein, and it all went pretty smoothly, all things considered. And it was just a really nice way to sort of start clinical life in fourth year.
I think my favourite memory of medical school so far was quite recent. So we had to redo our fifth year exams, and it meant that we were all quarantined and we were held in these rooms. And so we'd finished our exams, and we'd finished all of our OSCEs, which are like practical exams, and we were held in the lecture theatre for like 3 hours, and it meant we couldn't use our phones or laptops. And so everybody had brought in like card games and board games, and we ended up playing like Monopoly, and we played Articulate for about 4 hours, and it was just so much fun. And I think, yeah, it was like seeing everybody in a different light, because everybody was so chilled out and so relieved and relaxed, and we were able to enjoy that time together.
I love the medicine side of things. The psychiatry placements, I want to be a psychiatrist, so the psychiatry placements were honestly just, I'd waited all the way until fifth year to do them, and I was so nervous that I wouldn't enjoy them. But they were just like the best. So if there's something you're interested in, then just make the most of that placement when you come to do it, because quite often you'll find that it's better than you ever expected. But in terms of what I actually enjoyed the most during medical school, it would definitely be the extracurricular side of things. So just like singing and having that place to escape all of the stress that you're just kind of under all the time is crucial, I think. Can you tell me some of the factors which make coming to a university like Oxford worth it for you?
Yeah, I think one of the best things about Oxford is the variety of academic opportunities. I've definitely been very privileged to meet the supervisors for my DPhil here, and in general I think the university is incredibly supportive of people doing sort of academic things outside of just the course, which is definitely not the case at other medical schools necessarily. They're very encouraging of us to do like research around things, or sort of even opportunities within the course to like write a short case report for a patient and then maybe get it published. There's lots of kind of things in the course that allow you to delve a bit deeper into the academics behind medicine. And then in general, I think Oxford has a really unique social structure because of the colleges, and that's one of the things I really like about it, as well as these kind of like smaller institutions within the university. That means you're quite well supported on a welfare front, because you've got college support, you've also got medical school support, you've also got sort of university support. So there's like 3 different options there. But it also means there are so many more clubs and societies that are accessible to people. So with rowing, like I'd never be able to row for a university team, I'm not good enough, but here I've been able to pick it up and learn it really quickly, and that wouldn't necessarily be the case somewhere else. So it's been really exciting to get the chance to do that as well.
And how did you find the transition between preclinical and clinical?
It definitely is a step up, I'd say. I think it's weird because you go from like essay writing, very academic, to all of a sudden you've got patients in front of you, you're thinking of differentials. But I think if you can just get a registrar that can take you under their wing, and if you're always asking why and you're trying to understand the thought process, it becomes a lot easier just to have that mindset, especially when it comes down to diagnostics.
Also, the big change from focusing on depth of knowledge in one field to a massive sort of broad range of knowledge across the whole of clinical medicine is really hard. And you sort of come out of the year of focusing on your own scientific interests and have to convert back to sort of learning everything, which can be quite difficult sort of change of focus. But overall, I think it's been really nice to come to clinical school and actually put everything that I did before together, develop more of a clinical interest in science, and like learn the skills that I'm actually going to use as a doctor. It's been really exciting. So, yeah.
So that was quite interesting. We'd already had in our first year, on Wednesdays we spend 1 week in a GP practice and then 1 week in a hospital. So I'd had some clinical experience, which was quite nice going into the fourth year. But that when it kicks off properly, it was a big change having a lot less lectures and a lot less formal teaching and having to go out to find those teaching opportunities myself on the wards. So that was a bit of a culture shock. But I quite enjoyed doing the practical skills. So getting to practice bloods, cannulas, things like that was quite a nice change.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what expectations I had because we moved to clinical school during the pandemic. And so actually being able to go on to wards was a lot, what met my expectations or exceeded them, because there was a time where we weren't being allowed to do that at all. I think what surprised me was, I guess, how easy it is for medical students to blend into the background and be forgotten about. And that kind of is a skill that you learn like as you become more experienced, is how to make sure that you're getting something out of being there and just reminding the people in the team that you're actually there and you're there to learn something or you're there to help, and you're able to do that so to get them to let you.
So tell me a little bit about your first day on the wards.
I think first day in the wards is definitely a culture shock because you're like, whoa, what's going on here? You're seeing all these different patients, probably conditions that you probably haven't come across before, and you're there with a consultant and a registrar and like this team, and you're trying to sort of guess what's going on. You're seeing these like squiggles on an ECG and then like black and white stuff on an X-ray. So you're like, I don't know what's going on at first. So you're sort of bewildered. But I think then when you can start to understand a bit what's going on, you sort of recognize something and you can go back home and be like, oh, okay, so that's what's going on there. Oh yeah, I did do a bit of that preclinical. That's quite nice because you can start to connect the dots. And that means when you see something similar, you can pattern recognize. And I think that's definitely been the case with like loads of classical conditions. I don't know, like Graves' disease, for example. I always remember my first patient that I saw from it. So when you got those quite classical signs, you see it from a textbook and then you see it in real life, it's kind of weird because it's like, whoa, it's almost like it's so weird just seeing that for the first time. But I think that really helps to sort of connect the dots.
And my first placement was in the GP, which I really enjoyed. It's a nice sort of lead up to the hospital medicine. And I just specifically remember not realising the level of responsibility I'd get, or like the fact that from the first day I'd be asked to see patients and then report back to doctors by myself. But then I remember seeing a patient with a condition that I actually worked on during my FHS year, and talking to her about it and being able to ask her really focused questions and kind of bring forward a treatment plan based on that. And that was actually really, really rewarding to see someone with something I'd researched and sort of thought about a lot, and then be able to present it to a doctor saying, I've asked these focused questions, I know what this patient needs. It was a really rewarding first day. And you don't always know throughout medical school what to ask or what someone has. So I definitely got lucky in that moment. There are also moments where you go and talk to patients and you've got no idea what's going on, and that's perfectly normal as well. But that was a really exciting sort of first day of speaking to people and really realising this is real and I'm going to have an impact. So.
Did you struggle at all when you first met patients in approaching them, knowing how to do that?
I think it was fine to talk to them at first from like a personal level, just to find out how everything is. But I think speaking to a patient just to find out more about like their experiences or like how they're finding stuff is quite different to potentially taking a history and being quite focused and analytical about it. So I think talking to patients was something that I'd already done before anyways. But I think trying to know what questions to ask and how doctors can basically play chess when they're like having a conversation, and how, yes, they're trying to build a rapport, but they're also asking really good questions to then narrow down like what condition's going on and really being quite focused on that. So I think after a while you kind of learn better to do that, and you're not just asking questions for the sake of it, but you're asking questions in response to something particular that a patient said. So I think that mindset and being able to sort of go into that detective mode is something that takes a bit of a while to do, and I'm still learning how to do.
Tell me a bit about some of your favourite patient interactions.
I think there's so much, because it's quite a privilege, right? Being able to speak to patients, and even in being a medical student, they, that they put a lot of trust in you, and that means they can be quite open and honest about like their experiences of stuff. And also, for many, if they're finding it quite difficult to have, an appointment with a doctor or something, it's actually really good, sort of like therapeutic almost for them, just to be able to let something off their chest. One of the times that I imagine from A&E was someone that had like really, really high heart rate. They had atrial fibrillation, 180 beats per minute. They were going into shock, and then the doctor defibrillated, so they used a shock, and it was literally that, like an electric shock. And then it went back to 80 beats per minute. Blood pressure was absolutely fine. So it was something like out of a movie. So seeing those times, like, wow, actually that's incredible to see. Another case was like in obs and gynae, when I had a patient that came in because they were going into labour. This was like at 10 a.m. And then we were able to see that whole thing progress. And then a nurse took me under their wing, and they taught me like how I can help in assisting a birth. And that was honestly magical to help with that, to see like it goes from like no life to all of a sudden having a baby born, and literally being the first one to hold this baby, and they're just looking at you with their eyes like that, and they start crying, and they're like, right, okay, off to mum. So you get those really cool magical moments, I think, from both cases where it's like life or death, and that it gives you a perspective, I'd say.
And conversely, have you ever had an interaction which hasn't gone well, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think there's loads that come to mind. So whether it be the fact that a patient felt like dismissed, especially with their condition, or a child maybe having a heart condition and that wasn't taken seriously by the school, for example, or maybe it's just the fact that someone's really, and you can understand why, annoyed about the waiting times in A&E, for example. But I think in all those circumstances, it's just about actually having a conversation with them and remembering that they're a patient, they're a person, they're not just a disease. And actually, they probably have, there's a reason for why they're feeling a certain way. I think if you approach it in the right way and, you try and do the best for them, that always works. So I think just treating someone as a patient and as a person just works.
So tell me a little bit about your favourite places to study.
Favourite place to study definitely is the Bodleian Library. I think that's my go-to. It's nice and central. It's quite Oxfordy, so it's got quite a classical vibe to it. It's usually fairly quiet-ish most of the time. You can get a good spot upstairs. That's what I always go to.
Any other favourites?
College library, of course, of the convenience. I think GCC as well, they've got a free coffee machine, so it's definitely worth going to.
Speaking of coffee, where's your favourite coffee shop?
Ooh, Costa, I'd say. Can't go wrong.
Definitely the Teddy Hall Library. It's quite unique, and it's in an old church as well, which means it's really beautiful. I also quite like the hospital library. That's quite a nice one to pop to if you're in placement as well. And then all sorts of cafes and places as well. Probably Peloton is my favourite cafe to work in.
I mainly study at home, I have to be honest, but when I do study, I quite like going to the Radcam. I'm not sure if it's just because I like the aesthetic appeal of it, but being in the centre of town as well, there's lots of easily accessible coffee shops, cafes, supermarkets, so easy to get food and take breaks when you're in town.
And what is your favourite cafe?
In the centre, I'd say The Missing Bean, but where I live out in Cowley, I quite like Flo's in the Park. That's a nice cafe.
I've always studied in libraries. I quite liked working at the Jesus Library just because it was convenient. And before it got knocked down, I used to study at the Radcliffe Science Library.
Well, in pre-clinical, I studied in a library once, and that was just between lectures. And in clinical, I went a few times towards the end of finals, basically just because I just felt most comfortable working in my room. So I think working in cafes, I've also done a few times, and that can be nice and that can be fun, but I just love being in my own space and just being able to get a cup of tea and like procrastinate as much as I want. And I'm the kind of worker that just does it all day but procrastinates loads. So find whatever works and just be comfortable with that, really. So in terms of just value for money, I like Pret is always just the go-to. There's a subscription which most people have, I swear. And yeah, that's kind of the go-to for a quick coffee. But there's Art Cafe, which is where I always take my family. It's more expensive, but if your family come up, then they can pay. And art cafes just by Westgate is really nice. It's usually quite busy, but yeah, that's where I like to go.
And if there's one thing you could change about your career in medical school to date, what would that be?
I think it's probably believe in yourself and know that actually, you know what, there's certain things that you should worry about that actually you can change, but then there are other things that you shouldn't be worried about. So I think trust in the process of things, and always just reach out, to friends or older years if you need any help, because everyone's gone through the process and you're never the only one going through it.
I think I would have spent a lot less time studying and a lot more time like trying new things and keeping up with the hobbies that I started like in first term, but then gradually kind of dropped through the year as I got more busy. And I think I would prioritize like keeping up with playing a sport or keeping up with like doing a hobby, rather than like stopping doing them to spend more time studying or to try and catch up on essays or catch up on work.
So you said that one of the ways you deal with stress is to powerlift. How do you find balancing your time between medicine and other things?
Yeah, I think balance is something that we're all like aspiring to have, and it's always something that changes, right? Because you've got always changing demands for all those different dimensions of your life, whether it be social, university, competition-wise in terms of a sport. I think for me, Google Calendar, my friends will tell you, but I live my whole life on Google Calendar, and I like it for me because usually I'm quite spontaneous, and if I don't have a Google Calendar, I'm just everywhere and I won't get anything done. But a Google Calendar just gives me that regiment, so I color code it, and that allows me to just manage different stuff and be like, okay, from 8 p.m. onwards each weekday, that's my cutoff. 8 till 10, I'm gonna be at the gym, and that works for me. So I think it's quite useful, and it means that I'm able to do well academically, not in spite of doing sports, but actually because of it, because it actually gives you quite a nice stress relief and a coping mechanism, especially when, things can get quite busy with A&E or whatever it might be, or whatever placement. It just gives you an opportunity to forget all about that, just because you're going through the motions, you're enjoying yourself with friends when lifting, and they're cheering you on with the weights that you don't think you can lift, but then you're able to do it. So I think it's those little marginal gains that really add up.
And do you find friends are one of your primary sources of support?
Yeah, definitely. I think medicine can definitely be quite demanding at times, and especially in terms of workload, difficulties and everything else, friends absolutely, not only medic friends but also non-medic friends. Obviously this gets a lot harder in clinicals because most people start to graduate then, so you're really left with your medics, but I'm quite lucky that I've got like such a good medic cohort, both in terms of housemates, and that can be really good just to go to libraries together, get lunch, and also like games nights that we just do in the house, so whatever works for you, that can be really useful.
So I know you said that you did a research project in third year. Just for any first years that might be watching this, can you just tell us a little bit about what third year is and what it involves?
Yeah, so third year, sometimes known as the FHS year, I think, which stands for Final Honour Schools. It's like a separate degree, so you're studying for a Bachelor of the Arts in Medical Sciences instead. And within that, there's like separate sections. So you do a couple of modules. I think there's like metabolism, endocrinology, pharmacology, various different types of neuroscience, immunology, pretty much anything you could want to study. And then you also write an essay on a topic that you're really interested in, and you do a research project, which for most people is in the lab, kind of working with cells or sometimes working with patients. For some people, they do like a database project or coding or something like that. And there's a chance to go to other universities as well, which is really cool. Some of my friends went to Imperial College and did theirs there, which is really exciting. So that whole year is kind of focused on research and learning to do medical research and sort of develop your own scientific interests. So, yeah. Did you want me to talk about my specific project as well? Okay. So I was doing drug discovery research and working in drug repurposing in the Department of Pharmacology, and that was really good fun. I got to try and work out whether we could repurpose an old drug for a very rare genetic condition, which is a very sort of up-and-coming field of research. It's not as financially desirable to discover drugs for rare conditions because there's not as many patients who take them. So it's quite rewarding to work in a field where, It's quite rewarding to work in a field where big pharma isn't focusing their sort of efforts and kind of make those new discoveries yourself as well, which is really exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about your PhD and the opportunities that are available.
Yeah, so my PhD is in plastic surgery. I'm working with a really fantastic group looking at carpal tunnel syndrome, hoping to maybe cure it with a drug instead of surgery. So the medical school has been really fantastic and accommodating of this, and I'm on a specific program called the OxChem program, which is aimed at Oxford medical students and allows them to take time out to do research on something that they might want to look at deeper from their clinical school or from their research year. So it's really exciting.
Tell me about graduate medicine and how starting was different to when you started your undergraduate degree.
So obviously I'm a lot older. So I didn't have the same expectations of things like Freshers Week and starting a new course and going out and partying necessarily. I don't know whether the undergrads had that experience, but I think it was a lot calmer in many ways, having done a degree beforehand, coming in and being able to take that experience within psychology, because I could apply the skills I'd learned there, even if not necessarily all of the information wasn't useful until, say, our later years where we did more psychiatric medicine. I could still apply my knowledge of sort of scientific method, evidence-based medicine, things like that, which helped a little bit. And also just having a bit of extra confidence in my own academic abilities, I think, also helped. I don't know if undergrads found that.
And what study skills have you developed that help you get through the work efficiently?
So being able to structure your day well is important. Taking regular breaks, I think, helps my sort of brain to decompress and assimilate the knowledge I've taken in. So I'll take breaks every 20 minutes or something like that if I'm studying at home. Not long ones, just a couple of minutes. But having the discipline to follow that's the real skill you need to develop. And I've had my ups and downs following my own rules over the 4 years, but overall, so far, it's done me well.
How did you find it integrating with the undergraduate medical students?
It's been really lovely. I mean, they're all lovely. I haven't had a chance to meet half of them as much as I'd like because COVID got in the way of quite a lot of our integration in fourth year with lab medicine. We were all online, so I know lots of names, but not necessarily all the faces to go with them. But meeting people on our rotations has been really lovely. They're probably cleverer than I am. They know a lot more than I do. Yeah, I really don't know what to say to that one.
How did you find that you liked to study in your first 3 years?
I think how I studied in my first 3 years is definitely very different to how I study now. But I found that I could concentrate then for long periods of time. I used to usually work in the library because I used to like to separate like my living space from my working space. And I'd usually work in the library with other people, and so that meant that when we had breaks, we could all go and get like a coffee together or just sit and watch some TV in the GCR for a bit. And it just made studying, which is quite like an isolating experience because there's no getting away from writing your own essay or having to do your work yourself, just made it a little bit of a nicer experience.
Is there anything you wish you'd known about the setup of the course when you started in first year?
So I had no idea that the degree in third year, the FHS year, is like a standalone year. So I thought that the first, second and third year all counted towards that. And I also thought that the third year was pass and fail. I didn't realise like it's an actual like graded degree. I'm not sure how much it would have changed what I did, but it's just kind of useful to have that information from the beginning so you know what you're getting yourself into.
Is there anything you would change about how you approached your clinical years?
I don't really think there's anything that I'd change. I think every mistake was a learning experience and it's all worked out well so far, fingers crossed. We've not got finals results yet, but I think I've learned from the mistakes that I made, so I wouldn't go back and change them.
So you said you made mistakes and that they were learning experiences. What were those mistakes so that other people can learn from them without making those mistakes?
Yeah, I think what would have saved me a lot of time and heartache, I guess, was turning up to placements and expecting people to, first of all, know that I'm meant to be there, and second of all, help me achieve what I wanted to do. And I think you really realise that the onus to learn anything is on you, and people are willing to help so long as you tell them what you'd like help with and take direction. And they're happy to take direction from you. So I think go in with a plan, because just turning up and then expecting to learn things can be quite chaotic and just a massive, I think it's a, I don't want to say waste of time, but it is a waste of your time, because you can get things done a lot faster if you say, this is what I need to do and this is how I can achieve them. Will you help me do that? So I guess to summarise that, it'd be more direct in knowing what you want, and then don't be afraid to ask for it.
Alright guys, we hope you've enjoyed that video. If you have, don't forget to leave a like and also comment below on the next video that you'd like to see from us. Alright guys, see you in the next one.